Let's move on to the next phase of this little operation, which is to turn these drawings into a model. So one of the things that we'll need to do is convert the drawings themselves into copies, and I like to copy them onto cardstock. So that's one of the things I've done. I took my trace paper to the copier, both these drawings. Now, I think it's important, you know, the more detailed and accurate you are with this, the better. And again, having your collages right here, so as you're drawing, it's easy to reference them and then fill in those blanks. That'll be very helpful. So I copied the ground plan onto cardstock, a little thicker, and I copied my elevation onto cardstock. Now you'll recall that what I did was to lay in a baseline that follows each of these, right? So you can see how this lines right up there. And so when I put it into the model, it's going to fit just as is. So let us move into the ground plan first. And I think the thing we're going to want to do is create the bridge unit. And I think that'll be easiest to do with some black foam board. So I have a cutting board surface here that I can cut on. And I have my drawing here. And so I'm going to basically measure, and I recall that I should be a little bit wider than 40 feet using my scale rule, my 1/4 inch scale. So I found a nice clean edge here. I got my pencil, and I'm going to run a little over 40 feet wide. Dun, 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 dun. Hopefully that fits into the model pretty well. Right. Yep. And I recall that I was doing that 4 feet deep, right? So I made that mark and that mark. Now I can use this ruler. I can use my T-square. I'm opting in for my T-square because the edge of this is quite square also. So I can just draw my lines in. Very nice, very nice. And I can draw a line over here, which will get me partway out. And then measuring here, now we had talked about doing 45-degree angles. And so what I'm doing is measuring here from here to here. I'm reading 13 feet. And I believe that's what we had on the other one. Now, my copy didn't be exactly everything, so I'm going to use this to see. It kind of cut off my drawing a little bit, but I believe from the balcony edge in, that's reading about 12 feet. So then if I come out 12 feet, great, that's what I get. To here, then I can get my 45 in there, right? And so I'll do that on both sides. So from here, I'm coming up 12 feet, right? And then I'm coming in 12 feet, right down this line, right? Ta-ta-ta. So you can see right there. And then I'm doing the same thing over here, coming up 12 feet, right? And then I'm coming over here 12 feet. That gives me some wiggle room here. That leaves me 16 feet in between, which I believe is what I'm getting here. Yeah, actually, that's a little mixed up there. What do we have? Let's see, what's this coming in at? It's easier to see here. I'm symmetrical. No point in getting all confused as we get going. So that's 12, and that's 4. Good heavens. And this is coming in at 17. Wow, that's all mixed up. So this should be 12 over, right? And 4 in. Okay. There's that one. And then, right, and that is 12. Yep. And then that says that's supposed to be 17. So let's see where that takes us. Might as well follow what's there. Great. Okay. And then I'm going to follow this one out to here. Right. Good. So you can you see these lines? Are they dark enough for you? And then I'm going to take off my 4 feet here, and that's supposed to be 12 feet there. Well, that one's coming in at 3. So we're a little asymmetrical, and that's okay. Right, now to cut this, I have my little cutter here. And what I like to use is either an old T-square or a metal straight edge. And I'm actually going to save myself some aggravation and just slice this off completely here. Rather than trying to cut all these little bits out, I'm just going to go ahead and take this whole piece off of here. So rather than try to cut it all at once, I'm going to cut once, pushing down a bit, which gives me a bit of a line. Then I'm going to cut it again, depending on how sharp this blade is. And I'm trying to keep it as vertical as I can. See, I'm not tipping. If I tip, I get a weird cut. But I cut that in 3 runs rather than trying to do it all in one cut. Now, I didn't extend all the way. I have to cut away this last little bit over here. So 1 lightly, 2 a little deeper, and 3 is when I can really get through the whole thing. But you'll notice then that gives me a nice clean edge there. Now you can see I can get rid of some more of this stuff here. And I have another line. I'm going to get rid of these guys here. This edge. So go straight. I'm keeping it straight. 2. And then that final cut, I can push quite hard down. And again, nice clean edge. If I try to do it all in one swoop, doesn't turn out well at all. I'm also keeping my fingers way far away from the edge. 1, this blade's getting dull. 2, 3, and because it's getting dull, I can sharpen it by ticking that off, but I think I'm just finished, or breaking that, breaking it away. But I think just for the sake of doing it, I'm gonna finish this up. Right. And then I'm going to cut this last one over here. Yeah, it's starting to squish the foam board. I can hear it in there. Now, over here, I didn't quite get all the way through, so I'm going to take my straight edge. I flipped it over, and then I can just cut that real quick on the back side, you see? So this should theoretically line up with the ground plan, which I can look at, I guess here in cardstock is going to be easier. Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da. See how that works? That's going to sit right there. Now, I also know that the top of this should come in at 9 feet because I measured in my elevation of the building, right? I went right up from the floor and it came to 9 feet, just like that. So the next part that I have to do is I'm going to use some of this scrap and I am going to create some supports for this thing. Now, where exactly are we going to put them? I think, as I started to draw them here, I think here, and here, and probably something across the back along here to hold this whole monster up. That's going to be really important, or at least here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure up from here 9 feet. And then I want to make sure that I don't make this too high, right? So I do this on both sides. I marked 9 feet, right, on here. And then what I'm going to do, though, is take this, because I want to get accurate with the height, and I put the top of it right against the pencil marks, and now I can draw a line right along the bottom of the foam board. So when I cut this, it's going to be accurate for the height of what I need. I can pretty quickly lay this thing out and get ready to cut. I set my blade down on my pencil line, and then I take my straight edge, I run it along there, 2, 3, trying to keep my blade as straight as I can. And now any of these pieces that I cut, this is going to be an accurate height. I think also, though, I'm going to use this. Oh, look at that. It's almost exactly the proper height for here. I'm going to get this out of some more scrap. I will draw my line along here because I don't want to mess that up. All right. So I'm cheating and speeding along here, and take that little bit off of that. 1, 2, 3. I cut that away. Great. So now look at this. I have a lot of pieces here, but this is not working for me. So I'm going to take this 90 degrees here, right? I line this up very smooth along those edges. Now I can get a nice straight vertical cut just by running along there. Okay. Great. Now, how do I know how big should I make it? Well, I want this one to sit right underneath here. So I'm going to just line that up, make my mark there, and I want 2 of those. So I line this up as well. And again, I'm using this edge right along there, and I can go square here. 1, 2, 3. That cuts it away, and I have enough here to get my 90. 1, 2, 3. Ta-da! Now look at that. So now I have these guys working for me here. Right. Great. So I'll show you gluing them in a minute. But I'm going to cut more pieces to make sure I have enough support here for all these guys. So I'm going to cut pieces for here and here. Okay, but we're starting to get a sense of how this all might work together. So let me get my glue and my pins, and I'll show you how all that works. And so get out your tacky glue. And so what we're going to do is put these all in place, right? And I suppose it doesn't really matter which side is up because it's supposed to be symmetrical, but I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to run, actually, I think I'll do it on these. I'm going to run a bead of glue, nice glop of glue here. You see how much I got on there? Get all these going. Right. Good. And keep my glue handy. Hopefully it won't drip everywhere. Keep all my pieces handy. Now I got my straight pins cut, and I need those because I'm going to hold all of this together. Now, one of the difficulties, I think, is making sure that you're coming in at 90 degrees because you don't want wiggly woggly walls, right? And how the heck are we going to check that? Well, we can put this little square on there and tell what we've got. And by taking a pin, pushing straight down, right on through, that holds everything in place. Now, is it square? Rootin' tootin' close, that's for sure. I wiggled it just a little bit, see? Ta-da! One in the far corner. And then I can also put these guys in here and keep things in place. You should have a lot of handy pins. And I love the kind with these big heads. They're easier on your fingers when you go to push all this in. I'm going to turn this around so I can see it. Okay, so that's going to dry actually in a few minutes. It won't even take all that long. And it's holding this whole thing up, right? And then I can begin to verify it. Going to get my cap back on the glue. I like to store it upside down like that. I can begin to verify this thing to see how this works with this. And my actor in there. We got some good height here. So I can also take foam board now. I can either use black or white. And check it out. I got myself some platform here for this one. And I can begin to see what happens when I push that on and I get an actor up. Because this foam board in 1/4 inch scale comes in right around 7-8 inches. When I line this up, I find that actually this comes in at 9, maybe 8 inches, which actually is a good height for this wagon down there. 6 might be a little low. So you can begin to see what happens as these wagons sit in here. And again, if this isn't working for you size-wise, you can certainly change the nature of the wagon. Now, the next step while this is drying is to get my facades going, my elevations. So what I have is I copied them onto cardstock. I always keep my original around. And remember, as you go, when you have your drawing here, right, of your elevations, you can take, once you rough them in, at least what I like to do, is I rough things in with, right, and then I can take another piece of trace paper and lay it over this and begin to refine it more and more as I draw. I can draw with more clarity and detail. Now, one of the things I noticed as I was starting to work on this before, if I put my person in here, that railing looks a little bit high to me. And without seeing the person, I wouldn't really know that. So let me measure it. Oh, wow. I drew it in at about 3.5 feet. That's way too high for a railing. So I'm going to draw this lower. So when I'm actually doing the set design, but it's so much easier, you guys, when you draw a person. So I'm drawing this person upside down a little bit, but still gives you an idea of somebody up on the balcony, right? And what they would look like in relation to my railing. So in any event, I've copied this onto cardstock, and the more detailed I am in my drawing, the better. And so what I'm going to do now is actually try this with a cut to get this unit out of here. I think hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Right? So I just sliced this one out, and to keep the roof a little straighter, I'm going to lightly score here, and then I'm going to move back about 1/8 to 1/4 inch, give it some thickness, right? And now, when I fold that, it's going to give me strength there to stabilize this stuff. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. Cut this away. Okay. And I can score this as well. And I can score along here. But at the bottom, I think I'm just going to let it be what it is. I'm not going to try to stabilize that. So I'm just going to cut that off. So here's what I have. Now I lightly scored, but I also cut just a little there. So now if I do want to keep that stronger, I can bend this over, right? And I can bend this over. And I'm going to get rid of this little corner bit right there. And I scored all of these lightly with my blade. Now, if your blade's really screaming sharp, you have to push real lightly or it cuts right through. This blade's getting pretty dull, which is a good bad thing. A dull blade is dangerous because as you cut, it can get really strange and slip off. But it also can be handy if it's a little dull because then it doesn't go through this all the way. Now, one of the other things, though, that I do want to score here is this seam where the door is, this unit, this wall is going to pivot open as well. Because ultimately, I want it to be able to swing all the way open, right? So it'll go flat. So now I can begin to see what this starts to look like. Here's my wall on here, right? And then boom, I begin to put it in place. It's tipped there. You can see how that works. But then when I want it open for the audience, whoop, and it actually begins to form part of the rest of the house here. So I'm roughing this up before the glue has dried. So then I had my little wagon that pushes out this part of the house. Now, how am I going to keep that there? Well, I'm going to get a pin and I'll push it in and the pin will help hold things in place. We can begin to see how this wagon might work coming on stage. Now check this sight line. I think with this wall pivoted open, we're still okay if we decide to solve this problem in this way. It's just how I've been thinking about the design, but you should go ahead and think about it, solving it in your own way. Would there be another one here and then that pivots open? To find out, I'm just going to take this and cut this out. I can add all these elements in. Now, if I have a skyline, I'm going to do a separate drawing of that. And I can do an elevation and cut it out and add it right to this unit. Need the railing? I'm going to add that too. What do these drapes look like? I could just draw on some cardstock and stick it in there, begin to see what it looks like. And I can take photos of it with my phone. Sure hope this is helpful. So here's my little scale model. This is 1/4 inch. And what I did was to take the seating and I put it in place here. I know that it is 30 feet from the back wall here to the front row. So I made sure I measured that out. And then I just stuck this down on a piece of black cardstock. Now, I don't want to glue anything to the model itself because then when I go to change this out and do a different set model, I'm in trouble because everything's glued down. But if I put a piece of black cardstock down, then I can begin to build up pretty easily. This is a model for Mad Woman of Shiloh. And what I did here was to build a bridge across. It's 4 feet deep. And I put in all the different supports. And then I used these pins to kind of hold things in place. We need a staircase to get from up here down all the way. And so I built that actually by gluing together small pieces of foam board, slicing it all to the proper thickness, and then gluing each piece onto the next. You can see how I just glued them like that. Now that's pretty detailed. You can speed that process, but I also glued the elevation of the rest of the stair unit right there. Now I needed a facade because the first scene takes place outside. So I drew a 1/4 inch scale elevation. It needs graffiti on it. So using Photoshop, I scanned the drawing and then I got my graffiti and I could scale it in to make sure it's working. I actually did this drawing in 1/2 inch scale and then shrank it on the photocopier. It was just, and in Photoshop, it's just so much easier to play with the scale that way, because in 1/4 inch, it's kind of hard to draw these things with a lot of detail. So this actually just sits right up here and you can see the railing as well and how that lives here. Now I need my people for proportion and what have you. Now there are a lot of business people in this show, so I actually found some on Google, downloaded them into Photoshop, made sure they were the right size. So if you say the person is 6 feet in 1/4 inch scale, you take 1/4 of an inch 6 times. That makes an 1.5 inches. Whoops, I dropped the poor little guy. So there is my person, right? And I needed some furniture and other elements, and I can do this if I needed a couch. I could actually build one with pieces of foam board, and I got a pin in there to hold things in place. But you can see how I built that up with layers, right? So it's a little couch. I can do that with chairs, but they can be a little bulky that way. So one of the things also I did was to find images on Google, and I got them to the proper size, printed them on cardstock, and left a little base on them, and then I can stick them in place. Now they don't have a thickness, and it is a little hard to hold things upright if I don't get better with my base, but at least for the basics of the model to get things started, I can stand these things in place, right? Now in the next scene, the graffiti goes away. Oh yes, also I forgot, in this scene is a building. So I have my facade of that. This was just done on fabric in the final design. It would just be executed, drawn right onto muslin and put into place. I didn't want hard scenery in this because it's got to change over, but also I like the idea that it was pretty theatrical. So this unit actually would be removed, and behind it would be a large drape. And I got this drape also on Google and downloaded it, played with it in Photoshop, and there 'tis. And I need some trunks. So I found another image on Google and printed that out. And so I can set this into this scene. And I have another wall, the same thing, but without the graffiti in it. So I can switch this out. Then I can take pictures of these things and show the director and the other designers and the actors so they all know what we're doing. This is a little tippy because things aren't glued into place, but you get a pretty good idea of what it's starting to look like. What about the background back there? Well, again, I needed a sunset, so I just found one on Google, printed it on cardstock, and I can insert that back here. I also want you to note that I did take a little bit of black cardboard and I cut it to the size of my wings, my masking drapes. I don't know if you can see very well, but I put these in here. I'll tilt this up a little bit more so you can see. So these are my masking drapes in place, and because I have this cardstock down here, I can glue those right in, and then just some pins hold them into place there with the balcony. And I needed a proscenium arch, so I made that out of some foam board and inserted that as well. So now with my little people, lady in her fancy dress, I can tell what's going on proportionally here. Now my furniture all fell over, but you get a good idea of how all that works. So as you work with your model piece, as this dries, you should be able to drop it right into, and it fits right there with your balcony. And this would drop into place in your model. And then you can add your wall units to it, and it'll sit right there. And you can see what that starts to look like in your model theater. Hope that's helpful.